Today in episode 57 of the podcast, we will be reviewing the film Companion and the first two episodes of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. I'm Brad, he's Josh, and this is We'll Bring the Popcorn.
As always, before we get started with our reviews this week, please don't forget to give us a like and subscription on YouTube. Hit that notification bell so you're getting our episodes when they drop every single Monday. Also, if you're listening to us in the audio realm, please give us a 5-star review. It really helps elevate the profile of the show. Also, go to willbringthepopcorn.com where you can get access to all our archive videos, as well as our merch store and all our social media information. We can't thank you enough for your continued support.
Yeah, so this week we're going to do things a little bit different, and we've done this a couple times now. I'm going to be out for a few days during our normal time here, so we're reviewing the film. We actually just got back from watching Companion, so we're got it fresh in our brains, and we're going to jump right into the film review for Companion. So this is a rated R horror comedy that stars Jack Quaid and Sophie Thatcher as Josh and Iris, a couple who end up going on this trip out to meet some friends at this remote house out in the middle of nowhere on a lake. And things don't exactly go as planned or as they thought it was going to go. And got a few twists and turns, but I still believe, and we talked about it last week, that the second trailer did give away a lot. I don't think it spoiled everything, but it did give away kind of a lot of the plot. When you go from that first trailer to the second, like the first trailer left you with a lot of mystery about exactly what's going on. And the second trailer kind of took that mystery away. And, you know, I was also disappointed right before the film was the second Sinners trailer, which everybody's talking about because it gave a ton of stuff away. And I was trying to avoid it, but we couldn't avoid it because it put it right in front of the film.
Yeah, we couldn't just walk out of the theater in the middle. We could have probably just walked out in the middle of the previews and be like, no, we're going to save that for later.
We both looked at each other like,
nope.
Well, you can't avoid it because you're in the middle of a theater.
Right, but still, I agree, though. The second trailer did kind of give away the premise of the film, which they do a good job of kind of avoiding until you have to they do a smart job of building up to what we know, right? So Josh and Iris, like you said, are on this couple's getaway, and it feels a little bit like the relationship is too storybook, a little too perfect, a little bit something seems a bit off, right? So you especially with the way Josh and Iris interact with each other. Josh is very direct with his communication, almost like to a point where you're like, okay, had you not seen the trailer and know the premise of the film, you're like, okay, something feels a little bit off here. Like it's a little too perfect. She's a little too into making sure that all of his needs and desires are met, and it just seems like her sole purpose is to make him happy. Well, you find out the reason why, and it's because she's a companion bot. Like she's a bot that Josh rents from this biotech company that creates these lifelike companions that you can program to, you know, have certain intelligence levels and things like that. We have to spoil the movie when we talk about this because so much of the plot in the film is you have to talk about like what's going on in this film to really get an understanding of what's happening. But you come to the realization that she's this, you know, programmable robot, and, you know, they do a fun job of playing. Now you start to guess who else in these situations in this house is also potentially a robot for a little bit. And some of that pays off in a really fun way, but it kind of takes a dark turn in the film very quickly, like after that, when they get to this house, and you just feel the vibe shift when they get to this house, and you're like, okay, when is the horror element of this going to come into play? And it comes in very quickly.
Yeah, because you were first introduced to Kat, who is played by Megan Surrey. She, you know, they kind of established right away, Kat doesn't really like Iris, and we don't really know why. Well, we find out why and why everything's going on, but, you know, things are a little weird and strange at the beginning, and we get, you know, Iris kind of not sure what she wants to do. She doesn't know how to interact with his friends and everything. And I had to laugh the first time I saw Rupert Friend as Sergei because he looked like he's playing a Russian, but he looks like a redneck Pedro Pascal. And it was just so weird to see his look because he's got the mullet and he's got the like just handlebar mustache a little bit, like the Hulk Hogan stash a little bit. but he looked like a redneck Pedro Pascal, and that just threw me off when he started speaking with a Russian accent and everything else. Like, this is a kind of a really silly horror comedy. Like,
Sure,
it's
yeah.
kind of over the top and silly with its interactions and things it does, but it does get pretty dark. Like, it won't spoil everything, but, a murder ends up happening with all this stuff, and they're trying to figure out exactly what's going on, and kind of the mystery of the story, and more of the story starts unfolding and unraveling once that murder happens. And I did kind of see most of it coming.
Sure.
It's not exactly something that's going to blow you away with the mystery and stuff, but it was fun enough with how they did. Like, Jack Quaid is, if you haven't watched him on The Boys, he's fantastic and fun on there. It's very similar to kind of a character. It's not exactly Huey, but it's a similar type of character who's kind of, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is he this? Is he that? Is he a little sleazy? Is he? But you do get to get a little more mystery, and I just left the theater knowing that you don't trust Josh's.
And that's a fair point to make. Don't look at me sideways like that, man, because I take a little bit of offense. No, I was kidding. But yeah, he gets. You see this all play out in kind of a really fun way, and once you really start to see that thread being pulled, it doesn't stop pulling for the rest of the movie.
It just starts unraveling.
Yeah, it goes haywire really quick and really fun. And I think honestly, this is a really smart written film. It's such a nice refresher from the film that we just saw last week with Flight Risk, and little light spoiler on how I feel about it. I'm definitely going to rate that higher. It's kind of hard to be higher than what that film ranked for me, but I think they do a fun job of really spelling everything out. And, Iris coming to grip, they really deal with the whole Iris is kind of ignorant to the fact that she's a robot, but she becomes a little more aware of it through events in the movie, very directly, to kind of told brutally even, but when she figures out that she is, and like there's fun things that they do to play with that throughout the film of trying to, how are they going to get out of this situation they find themselves in with this murder? How are they going to get away with it? How is, what the actual plan is? And they do a fun job of telling that story throughout this film in a way that honestly makes a lot of sense. And you could see how it was planned, but it wasn't planned well, and it goes horribly wrong for a good reason. And that's part of the fun in this movie. Like, I really had with us literally coming straight here from the theater, I haven't had that much time to process, everything I feel about this movie. But like, from my initial reaction, just coming straight from the theater, I actually really had a lot of fun watching this movie. And, it's kind of a refreshing take on a horror film where you see people try to use robots or artificial intelligence, and we've even done reviews on other films like AI and all that stuff that kind of uses it in a hokey way or not a real practical way. I think this did it probably the most practically of anything I've seen up to this point, in a way that it feels really believable and kind of scary when you sit down and think about it, of what could happen, if you give autonomy to these robotic things that we're always joking about Skynet, but like this movie dealt with it, like those subjects, in a very practical way that I think hasn't really been done in this genre yet.
Yeah, because you can go back in our archives. Last year, we reviewed Afraid, which dealt with an AI that was kind of brought into his house, and he's learning about it, but it's like instantly trying to take over, like it's trying to do the stuff. And this is much more silly. This is about potentially, something that could happen. This is, we've created these AI robots that don't know they're robots. So, they're subservient. They can, the user can alter their voice, which is played a lot in the film, but their intelligence, and alter a lot of stuff about them. But we also see kind of the AI growing and learning and thinking and doing things on its own. And it does play with that of what isn't that far away. If you've seen any of the videos from, especially like from big tech companies in Japan and everything else, there are they show off a lot of AI heads of women and men of just talking to you and acting like it. It is kind of frightening that this technology isn't that far away. Yeah. I mean, Sophie Thatcher does move a little bit robotic to kind of play with it, but past that, you don't really get to see a whole lot that she looks like a real person. She moves like a real person, acts like a real person for the most part. You do get a little of that stiffness, which I can tell that they were, trying to play that up just to
little bit.
a little cue of like, all right, she's not exactly the same, but it did play with some interesting things when it came to her and her learning about who she is and what they're doing with it, and just showing also the dangers of playing with something that can learn and can grow and has memory when it comes to something AI. And yeah, I thought that was pretty fun.
One of my favorite lines from the movie is, did you jailbreak your sex bot? It's one of my favorite lines from this movie, just kind of taking away from it. But that's kind of what you're talking about, though, being able to take these, robots and control them. And, okay, they try to go outside the factory settings. I'm spoiling a little bit of some of the stuff that happens in the movie, but, like, it's crazy that they, like I said, that's part of the practicality of it, though. How often you hear about, like, jailbreaking a device or something like that? Not that we condone that, but, like, there's, like I said, that's part of the practicality in it is, you have this thing that's programmed to work within certain boundaries, and you get it to go outside of those boundaries. What are the consequences of it? Like I said, it dealt with it in such a fun, practical way. It was just, in my opinion, a very smart written film that, on the surface, it makes total sense. I thought Sophie Thatcher was fantastic, kind of playing on the whole coming to grips with the fact that she's a subservient robot who is trying to make her own decisions, but she's also trying to override her own programming kind of thing. It's a really fun and really smart way. Like, you could tell the people that wrote this movie did their homework on this in a way that, like I said, just makes sense when you break it down. And I got a lot of enjoyment out of this.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a creepiness factor to her when she was like shut down and in like sleep mode and stuff.
Sure.
But overall, this really isn't a scary horror film at all. It's definitely the campy horror, which I enjoy. I enjoy a good campy horror if it's done right, like if it's done in the right way. And I felt this was done in the right way. Like it had enough of the humor and that went with enough of the darkness, and it didn't really shy away. Like, it didn't get gory, but there's plenty of blood that happened in this movie. There's also some fun that happened with it because, of course, not going to give too much away here, but, they're able to get Iris contained for a little bit. And, two of the guys are outside calling the police to get them to show up. And you saw it in the trailer too. It's like, oh, no, she's tied up inside. We're good. And she just opens the door and runs off. And the other guy's trying to get the attention. He's like, I'm on the phone, and just refuses to pay attention. It's like, yeah, you could have stopped her, but you're just too tied up in your own phone call to do anything about it.
It's a lot of fun, and it just, Harvey Guillen, who plays Eli, one of the friends in this movie, does a great job as well. It's just it's a lot of fun, man. It's really hard to like go beyond that and like really break it down without spoiling the entire plot of the movie, but it's told in such a way that makes so much sense. I love how they wrapped up the entire film, how they got to the end of the movie, and, just what the fallout from that is. And, just, it's a really fun play on robotics and, where we're heading technology-wise to kind of tell a fun story in like this horror genre. Because don't get me wrong, there are some gruesome, like some very gruesome, like when it's violent very quickly, and a couple uncomfortable scenes. Just a fair warning, this definitely is not a movie for younger kids, but there's at least one scene in particular that could be a little triggering if you deal with any sort of abuse that is touched on in the film as well. So a little bit of a warning for that if those are triggering things for you to watch, because they don't go too far with it, but just enough to kind of make you shift in your seat a little bit, little uncomfortable. But just know that like those types of things are in this movie. But like I said, it's just so practically. That's a lot of times. That's all I want from a film is just tell me a story in a way that makes sense. It's not too over the top. Like if you're gonna go over the top, just be completely over the top with it. But I love it when this is like a completely grounded story that you could actually legitimately see happening. And the whole murder plot with the planning and all of that, it feels like a very sloppily laid out plan when they do it, but that's how practically you could see a lot of these things going, where they don't put as much thought into it as they probably should have, and don't have all the contingencies planned for. Like they're not super villains, they're just practically laid out plan that doesn't go the way they hope it would. It's just, I can't speak enough to how much I really appreciated just the practicality and the smartness that went into the writing of this movie.
Yeah, even when you're talking about the practicality, even the special effects and things they did with the AI and the robots and everything else, and even in the violence, it was done well. Like nothing really took you out of it because it was too jarring or looked off, or they used some CGI or something that didn't really need to be done. Like everything looked pretty good. And there, like I said, there was some graphic violence that they didn't kind of pull away from. You got to see everything happen, and it was quite a lot of fun. Like I enjoyed what they did with it. Like I said, normally we like to compress and have a little bit of time to really think about it and go about this. I mean, it's not exactly a deep story, but it does well enough with the story it's trying to tell. So, in the end, Companion was a fun horror comedy. Jack Quaid and Sophie Thatcher were great as Iris and Josh. It had some good practical effects. It got a little gory, but it didn't go over the top with the gore. It does have a lot of blood and violence and stuff to it, but it's got a good amount of humor and it told its story well. I would probably give this around a 7. That's not a knock on the movie at all. I had a lot of fun with it. It had a few issues and, it was a little silly and over the top, but that's kind of what you wanted out of it. You wanted something that was a fun, campy horror movie, and that's what they delivered.
Agreed, and it's one of those films, like I said, it's practical. It's told in a way that makes total sense when you think about how a movie, like if you told me the entire plot of this movie, the way they tell the story makes total sense. It's an easy to follow along story. You're not really guessing a ton. It's such a smart written story. The acting is really well done. I think Sophie Thatcher is fantastic in her role as Iris in this. Jack Quaid is obviously, very Jack Quaid in this. I hate it. Sounds like a negative, but it's not. Like you know what you're getting from Jack Quaid in this. It's very. We jokingly said it's like a toned down version of himself in The Boys, like that. And I think that's a good way to describe it here. And for that reason, with the practicality, the well written story, the easy to follow plot, in a way that makes a lot of sense, I'm giving it a 7.5 because it is a really fun, original type story, and it's told in a way that's, like I said, easy to follow and super fun. Like I just really enjoyed it. This is one I could see coming into my rotation of watching more than once, and for that reason alone, I have to give it a little bit of a higher score. So I'd say a 7.5 is good for me.
Yeah, that's like I gave a 7. It could lean into a 7.5, but it was fun. Like it didn't blow me away, but I had an enjoyable time with it. But Companion is in theaters now. Go check it out, see it for yourself, and see what you think of it. If you do go, come to our socials, come to the comments on this video on YouTube, go to our Discord, come talk to us about it. We'd love to talk about the film with you, and we enjoy. That's why we started the podcast. We talked about movies so much with each other, like, oh, let's put it out there and see if we can talk to some others about how we feel on film. And this one was an enjoyable one to go see.
Absolutely. Definitely go check it out and let us know what you think. But now I want to move into our TV review of the week. So we had our first 2 episodes of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. This is a new animated feature that's out on Disney Plus now. They dropped the first 2 episodes this week. We got a couple weeks with a few episodes dropping. We're going to follow along each and every week that the show is out. We get our first 2 episodes, and one of the things that stands out immediately for me on this show is the animation style. This is it's a very different animated look than what we're used to seeing from a lot of the, classic Spider-Man cartoons, or even the ones that have come out for the last 10 to 15 years that they've tried to recycle with Spider-Man. The animation style is very unique for this, and visually is the first thing that stands out, but you get kind of a modern, updated telling of Peter Parker's origin story here, because you start with Peter as, getting ready to start his first day at Midtown High. He's very excited to, start and learn about robotics and do this, that, and the other. And, you get to Midtown High, and he's ready to get in and, get started. And of course, a portal opens up. Here comes this monster, tries to attack, and Doctor Strange shows up. You get your first kind of cameo appearance from a Marvel character in this, and the monster kind of does some destruction to the high school, so now he has to kind of change plans and go to a different high school. But in the first 2 episodes here, you kind of get this takeoff of Peter Parker's origin story as Spider-Man, where he gets bit by the spider, and you jump forward a little bit, a couple months, to where he's getting a little more comfortable being that spider. And now you start getting introduced to a couple of the characters in this show that, we all know, but could be slightly different takes on the characters that we're used to.
Yeah, and with the spider, it doesn't, going back to it, it doesn't come from the normal place that it normally does. It drops out of this portal of Doctor Strange's, and when he takes the symbiote type of villain back through, it cuts the web of the spider, which of course drops it on Peter. But it's also one where Uncle Ben is already dead in this series as it opens up before he's become Spider-Man. So it does play with the origins a lot. Like, there's, of course, a lot of already talk and discourse online with people saying, I don't even like the word woke and all that other stuff, because, they've changed races of characters and they've done this and that. It's its own interpretation of the Spider-Man story. And going to the visuals, it's definitely like a motion comic.
Sure.
Like, it's if you took a screen of it, it's supposed to kind of look like a panel out of a comic. And it had a pretty fun intro where they kind of remixed the old Spider-Man theme with a more of an upbeat rap that also showed you like different versions of Marvel Comics and Spider-Man all throughout, which was a lot of fun. But it is its own different take because it doesn't really waste any time. Once he gets bitten, it jumps into him having a suit, going around getting bad guys and stuff. So he's got like an air tank for his web. So it's a very early version of his suit, but he's catching bad guys and going live and taking selfies with them. So it's very up to date and modern to how a modern kid would kind of be. And, we don't really have a Mary Jane or anything else, but we have our first love interest in here with Pearl that, she's a little bit older. She's dating the captain of the football team, and, he's kind of supposed to hate him, but he actually starts, you kind of get a more depth than you normally do with something like that, because you're learning that he kind of lives in a rough neighborhood and he's just trying to kind of make friends with Peter and be something more than your kind of average jock, that he actually has some intelligence behind him. So that was an interesting little kind of twist and take, because he's just, he's a meathead and I'm not going to like him. Like, oh, wait, he's not that bad of a guy.
Yeah, when he starts talking to him. But it's fun because if you're a big comic book nerd like we are, you understand the name of, Pearl's boyfriend is the name of the person who grows up to become Tombstone, which is one of the big Spider-Man villains. So it's fun. It's a fun element of a story that you could play with should that person decide to become Tombstone. You get names, you get introduced to some other names that, are kind of not necessary to the plot of the story yet, but they're fun nods and names to classic Spider-Man characters. So you get your appearance from Amadeus Cho. You get the character who's ultimately Asp, who's one of them. You get a Wiccan character who is Spider-Man's kind of Peter's best friend, who, you don't know these things unless you're a big comic book nerd, but, Nico is, a Wiccan who, has abilities as well, potentially, but they don't play that up in this. And what I love about this is that they don't, like, they're part of the story, but they're not the driving part of the story. The driving part of this story is Peter trying to figure out how to balance his, superhero responsibilities that he feels with his, trying to navigate through high school and, things like that they're starting out with. And that's more of the focus than all of these other characters who, big time comic book nerds like we are, we know who these people ultimately are, but they do a fun job of like tangentially introducing them and, just keeping them around just in case they decide to go there with some of these. It's kind of an ode to us who grew up watching Spider-Man that love it, who are probably going to give this show a chance, but it's enough when you introduce it to kids who probably aren't as familiar with the history of all these characters that they're told in a way that it's a fun way of having these characters around that I really enjoy that they've done so far.
Yeah, there's already in the first 2 episodes quite a bit of Easter eggs if you pay attention, either names or stuff in the background or license plates and things like this that give stuff away. And we also got somewhat MCU kind of references as well, because in Tom Holland's, we have Tony Stark shows up and he offers, Peter a job and knows he's Spider-Man and everything else. And in this version, Norman Osborn shows up and he's the one like, all right, well, I'm going to offer you a job because I see that you're a smart kid and everything else. And so, the second episode is all about that internship. So he's interning at Oscorp and he gets a really cranky, grumpy old professor, I guess, but he's more of a scientist there. But it's definitely set up like another school type of situation where, we're introduced to from somebody from Wakanda. So we've already got Wakanda has been introduced into this world. And, he's placed in, they do a few experiments so that they're placed into their place in Oscorp, and he gets placed under Dr. Connors. In this version, it is a female, so it's another kind of swap. I didn't mind it. It's a fun change, and, the voice acting was great with it, and we got to see a little bit of bonding and connection and everything there. But, yeah, a lot of it is about, especially now that he's got the internship, he's got high school, and he's also got being Spider-Man that he's got to try to balance.
Yeah, and you can kind of see the direction that they're going for the show so far. That I think these are really two fun first 2 episodes to drop, because you get the teaser at the end of the second episode. To kind of jump ahead a little bit, you get the teaser at the end of the episode that Norman Osborn discovers that Peter Parker is Spider-Man very early on. So now you get to be like, okay, well, now where are we going with this? How is that going to play? Because, Peter really wants this internship to work out because it's paid, and his humble situation at home with Aunt May, and they don't make a lot of money, they don't have a lot, so he's really wanting this paid internship to work out. How is that dynamic between Norman and Peter going to work out? And this is obviously, if you know anything about who Norman Osborn is, if you're not aware, he's ultimately Spider-Man's greatest villain in many people's opinions in the Green Goblin. So we'll see how that plays out. You can kind of tell that Osborn's got this real sinister side to him, and they're kind of keeping that true to form here, even though he's like the most famous guy in New York City, the way they introduce him in this. And it's just a fun, different take from what you're used to. Like, don't get, like, my best advice to people, just go into it with an open mind. You have these characters that, if you're a big Spider-Man fan, it's just a different way of showcasing some of these characters. Don't get caught up in the fact that it's not exactly who we've seen that story done so many times over the years that it's fine for this to be a different take on it, and I saw some of that discourse that you're talking about, where it's just, people just can't enjoy anything anymore. You can't just take a story and, like, just because it's not 100% comic book accurate with things that you can't get any enjoyment out of it. That's BS. I don't believe in it.
How many times have characters changed in the comics themselves and had many different storylines, different takes on them and stuff? Yeah, it's ridiculous that you have that group on the internet who's just going to complain about everything. Oh, they race swiped or they gender swapped. Like, okay, if they do it right, then what does it really matter? Like, if it's a fun, different play that allows you to give a different angle on these characters and the relationships and everything else, why not go with it? Why not play with it? Because, we've already got word that season 2, they've already got, like, most of the animatics done. They're already heavy into that, and it's already been greenlit for season 3. So this show's going to be around for a little bit. Now, it's not perfect. There are a few issues. Like, the animation does kind of throw me off at times. Like, I watched it on an Apple computer with a 5K monitor stuff, and it looked fuzzy at times. Like, I haven't always had that with different animation stuff. Like, especially the background looked really fuzzy when it was going, and the animation did kind of throw you off a little bit, especially with, like, background actors and people going through. Like, the faces looked a little squished and off. Like, it looked great at times, but also looked a little off at times. And I think it's just going to take a little bit of time to get used to this style, because it is trying to give the look of a comic book while doing, full motion animation and stuff with it. And it's kind of like I think it's a little bit better than What If in a way of the movement, and it's definitely much cartoonier than What If was. But it's interesting, these two different styles that Marvel has tried with What If and your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man to kind of give a different look than your standard animation, either in CGI or hand-drawn, to kind of give you a different look to it. And I'm looking forward to seeing more out of it. Like, the drops are kind of weird and interesting, as we mentioned last week. Like, we get the first 2, and I think next week we have 3 episodes to watch, and then I think 4 or 5 episodes. Right? I think it's about 10 episodes altogether, but it's getting dropped in chunks and stuff. And these 2 did play well off each other, so I'm looking forward to see how these drops and if these episodes really fit together really well to tell a good story overall. And it was fun. It like I said, there's a few quirky things about it that you kind of get used to because it does make a lot of changes to Spider-Man, but I'm open to it to see where they go with it. It was a little slow in the first 2 episodes, but it's kind of trying to build this new world because there are so many changes with the characters and, having Uncle Ben die before he's Spider-Man and everything else. So they're trying to establish that world first before it really starts diving into it.
Yeah, I know it's a good thing you mentioned like the animation being a little off, and what I mean by a little off is I think when it's just characters talking, it feels a little I don't know if crunchy is the right word to use it, like a little bit crunchier, but when they get into like the action animation, it really feels like it flows a lot smoother and it looks better when it's, the fight scenes, like, you get Peter's first really good fight as Spider-Man because, he's catching these street criminals that are pretty easy to round up and web up. And then you finally get one that has a little bit of ability to him and it gives him a little bit more of a fight. So you get to see a little bit more of what Spider-Man's made of. And that back and forth in that fight was really well done. I think the animation looked really smooth. And so you can kind of see they're still finding themselves with this show, but I'm here for the journey. Like we said, despite how you feel about the show, guys, it's not going anywhere. It's going to be around for 2 to 3 seasons. The 3rd season's already been greenlit, so the show's going to be around for a while. So just kind of enjoy the journey. Like, turn your brain off to the fact that it's not a perfect what you remember these characters as rendition of a story, and just take it for what it is. If you give it a chance and it's not your thing, nobody will really fault you for it, but I'm enjoying the first 2 episodes and kind of excited to see where they go from. We got a little bit of it spoiled where they're heading for the rest of the season with some of the people that are, reportedly attached to the show. If you're a WWE fan, one of the wrestlers from the New Day, Big E, is voicing a character in this season. You also got word that Charlie Cox is going to be voicing Daredevil, who shows up. And
apparently Vincent D'Onofrio is going to show up as
Kingpin as well. So you'll get some of the MCU actors to be in it. Definitely was not Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange in that first episode, but it felt very much like a Cumberbatch Strange, the way they
talking to the cape and everything in the same way that he interacted with them.
It felt very much like a Benedict Cumberbatch Doctor Strange the way they wrote him in, but definitely wasn't him with the voice. But yeah, man, just enjoy the ride. Go into it with an open mind and give it a chance. I think you'll find a lot of enjoyment with it.
And we did get some of that fun already kind of early on of the quippy, sarcastic Spider-Man because he's supposed to meet Nico at a party, but there ends up being a fire going on, and it's an arsonist who's burning down this building because he's been hired to burn down the building, but you get him quipping with him like, oh, you're supposed to be burning down a building on, like, I think it was 57th Street, or 53rd Street, like, this is 51st, and it pans out the window where they're looking like, well, it looked like it needed to burn down. Like, you get a little bit of that fun campiness to it that, fun. Spider-Man's had the serious, it's had the campy, it's kind of had also, it's trying to do something new while also paying tribute to all the different ways that Spider-Man's done. I've had fun with it. Like, the first suit is supposed to kind of look a little rough.
It's supposed to be.
And, just strange a little bit, but it's going to evolve. He's going to get, we've already seen 3 or 4 different suits from the different promo images and stuff. So, we have quite a lot ahead of us, and it's going to be interesting, especially as we said with the end of episode 2, where are we going to go with 7 more episodes to go? Like, that's a big reveal to start it off, that someone like Norman has that information at the beginning here, because you go from him not being Spider-Man to someone already knowing who he is, and that's a big thing, especially when it's one of the most powerful people in the city.
And I think that's kind of a payoff for watching it as it's coming out like we are, because I don't know if you had that same impact if you waited to watch the entire series, like the entire season when it's done, and going back and binge watching all the shows. The fun part about this is they're relatively shorter episodes. So the first episode was like 30 minutes, 31 minutes. Second episode's like 29 minutes. You could watch them both in an hour. They're very quick to get through and very easy
because there's like
to watch.
4 minutes of
the credits and things like that. So
end.
You're really getting it under an hour to watch these episodes. But it's fun. I think the way they're doing the drops of the episodes, strategically grouping groups of episodes, is because narratively it's going to have the biggest impact on the viewer in the way that they're releasing them, because it's not, I don't think it's just arbitrarily, we're just giving you 2 episodes now, because we know how it ended. It ended on a cliffhanger. So if you're watching it when it drops and you're waiting for, like we are, for these next couple episodes to drop, you're just like, oh man, where are they going for it? So it kind of rewards you for watching it in real time when they drop it and kind of going along for the ride that way than I think it would if you just waited until it came out and tried to watch the entire thing. Because when you get to this stinger at the end where it's like, oh, like hello Spider-Man, that Norman Osborn says, you're just going to jump right into the next episode. But if you're along for the ride like us, you get the fun of waiting and seeing how they take it to the next. And they're dropping 3 episodes next week, so I'm assuming that batch of episodes will carry on and get us to another stopping point where we can talk about it again, and I'm excited to go on that journey.
Yeah, because like I said, we really haven't had a drop done in this style before, because it's either they drop everything, which is the main Netflix style, or you might get 1 or 2 episodes at the premiere, and then you're weekly, after that, but we're getting 4 different batches of this because they're trying to get it done in February because, as we know, as you've heard us talk about a lot, Daredevil Born Again starts at the beginning of March. That is something like we cannot wait for, but, they didn't want to have an overlap. It's kind of curious that they're putting them back to back like that, especially with Charlie Cox and, Vincent potentially. Well, we know Charlie Cox is, Vincent has been rumored. I don't know if there's confirmation or not that he is fully in there, but he's going to be in there. So you get those 2 in there, and then we go right into the live action version, which are talking up and hyping up a lot with that. So we just cannot wait to see what they do with that. But this is going to be something kind of fun and campy and everything else to lead up to something that's going to be very dark and violent. So it kind of might help each other, that you get that fun lighter that's for everybody. And then you get Daredevil that's, well, not for everybody, but for those who love the Netflix series, it's going to be fantastic. But I had a good time with your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. I do want to see the animation hopefully get a little bit smoother. You could even see it in the trailers before the series came out, that it had this little bit of fuzziness, jankiness, that it didn't always look smooth. Like you said, it looked better with the action and everything going, but it's just walking down a street or characters talking, it's not always the smoothest. So hopefully that's something they could probably clean up in season 2 or something else, take that feedback, because it did look like I found myself at times just looking around like, oh, why does this look, why do the lines look so fuzzy? Why does his face look so squished? Like, it does have a few issues with the animation style on it. Like, it's a fun and interesting style, but it has a few problems.
And it could wind up just being part of the charm of the show, and that could be the intent of the animation there too. Also, I see your graphic designer.
I'm gonna pick everything
your gears
apart.
turning with that, and it's fun to watch you get into that mode, because it's fun to watch how your brain works with certain things like that. But yeah, it's a ton of fun. I'm here for the journey. For the love of God, stop. Just if you have no enjoyment or interest in watching this, just don't watch. Why get on the internet and complain about it? Stop.
Especially complaining before you've even seen it.
Yeah, a lot of people are doing that before they even check it out, just because they hear things about the show or what have you. It's ridiculous. Go into it with an open mind. I think you'll get a lot of enjoyment about it. Just don't go in expecting your classic tale of how Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man and starts to navigate that, because it's not what this is. This is a different take on it, a little bit more of a modern take, because, I mean, for the love of God, Spider-Man's been around, 60, 70 years almost?
And we've had 10, 15 different animated shows featuring Spider-Man up to this point.
You've done the origin story to death at this point, but this is a different way of telling it. So just kind of go, enjoy the ride, and, if you give it a chance and you don't like it, that's perfectly fine, but go into it with an open mind. I think you'll have a really good time.
Yeah, I agree. Like, just stop focusing on, oh, they change a gender, oh, they change the race or something else. You're the problem if you're stuck on that. I'm going to be honest. Like, you're the problem if you can't get past that, because there's nothing. If it's done right, then it's fine. If it's done wrong, then we can say something about it. But 99% of these complaints is before it's even been released, and they've seen how these characters have, even after 2 episodes, you can't make a decision on how these characters have been done because you haven't seen enough of it.
Yeah, you got to let the story kind of play out. And like I said, give it a chance. I think you really get a lot of enjoyment out of that for sure. But your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, the first 2 episodes are out on Disney Plus right now. Please go check it out. Come to our Discord. Let us know what you think about that. Comment on this video if you've watched the first 2 episodes. If you agree, if you disagree, we'd love to have that banner back and forth with you for sure. But let us know what you think when you check it out.
Yeah, we hope you follow along with us here. We will have like 1 week where we do take a little pause from following it because we have Cobra Kai, the finale of that coming out. So we're going to be pausing just for 1 week, and then we'll get back into these episodes. So, follow along as we go and see how this series and season 1 wraps up. As we said, season 2 is mostly complete. They've got more work to do, but it's almost done, as season 3 has already been greenlit. So, this series, no matter how you kind of feel about it now, it's going to be around for a little while. So enjoy the ride.
Absolutely.
So coming up this week, one movie I've been really looking forward to since I saw the first trailer is Love Hurts. So you've got Ki Hu Kwan and Ariana DeBose. It's an action comedy where he's a former hitman now working as a realtor, but his past comes back to him, and we see quite a lot of action. I just love him. Seeing everything is, and I love the resurgence he's had since he did the Goonies. He kind of disappeared. No one really knew, unless you were in the industry, that he was part of the Fox X-Men franchise doing the action choreography for that. So he was around behind the scenes, and then Everything Everywhere All at Once brought him back to the forefront, of course, getting him the Oscar and everything else.
Really?
But he just seems like such a genuine guy that's kind of hard to see in Hollywood and stuff. Like, he's been so excited about everything. And this looks like a lot of fun. You've even got some NFL players showing up in there that could, at times it can be bad or It can be good. It looks like it might be fun because this is a quirky looking action comedy. So that should fit right into it. But I'm really looking forward to checking that one out.
Yeah, the trailer looked like a ton of fun. It's going to be one that I'm looking forward to watching and reviewing. Definitely one to check out for sure.
We also have another action comedy, but it's a horror slasher film because they're saying it's as much romance as it is slasher with it. But if you've seen the Red Band trailer for it, it can get pretty brutal, and that's Heart Eyes. So you've got Olivia Holt, Jordana Brewster, Mason Gooding, Devon Sawa, all of them in it. It looks like an interesting, campy slasher film where, this killer is killing couples on Valentine's Day, and he doesn't allow them to get away. But like I said, the Red Band trailer shows it's going to get pretty violent.
Yeah, it definitely looks wild, gory, and one that I'm excited to go check out as well because it looks like a ton of fun. Definitely a unique twist on the horror genre that is very much needed in 2025 for sure.
Yeah, those campy type of horror stuff like kind of got with Companion, even though it didn't go that over the top. It can be fun. Like Shaun of the Dead is one of my favorites, and consider that a campy comedy horror because it doesn't take itself too seriously because you've got Red on You and everything else. And, those can be really fun if they're done right. They can be really bad if they're not done right, but if they do them in the right way, it can be a ton of fun. Moving over on the streaming side, we got the Amy Schumer comedy Kinda Pregnant on Netflix on February 5th. And then on demand, we have All We Imagine Is Light. So this was one that a lot of people thought was going to be contender for the, foreign film of the year, but it didn't get a nomination. But I'm interested to check it out. It's an Indian film that looked pretty interesting. That drops on February 4th, along with September 5th, which is about the 1972 Munich Olympic hostage situation that happened. That looked like it was going to be pretty good, but we didn't get a chance to check it out in theater. So I'm looking forward to checking it out on demand.
Yeah, the trailer for it looked very interesting. I'm excited to get it on demand and check it out for sure because that's one that I know we talked about potentially watching and reviewing, but we didn't get around to it. But definitely happy that it's coming out on demand to give that one a look.
And then on TV side, we have Invincible Season 3 is going to be on Prime Video on February 6th. So if you haven't seen the animated version of this based off the comic books, it does get very violent, very adult with it. It's added a ton of people to Season 3. Like, there's some names I didn't expect to see showing up for Season 3. So it's going to be really interesting. They talk like they want to keep Invincible going for a long time. Of course, we had a huge gap between Season 1 and 2, but they've done a better job of having a much smaller gap between Season 2 and 3 because I don't think I even finished the second half of Season 2, and Season 3 is already here, so it tells you just how much quicker they've got it put out.
Yeah, they were definitely one of the funniest things was the initial trailer they dropped for it was kind of poking fun at the fact that they're getting it a lot sooner than we got season two. So very meta, but yeah, a fantastic, brutal, violent, adult animated series by Robert Kirkman, who's very famous for obviously creating The Walking Dead as well. This is his venture into another comic that's being, it's been an animated series now on Prime Video, done really well. Excited for season 3. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff to see this week, depending on if you like the historical drama stuff with September 5th, or you like the action comedy with Love Hurts. There's quite a bit that you can look forward to this upcoming week. And again, Love Hurts and Hard Eyes, is going to be interesting to see which one comes out ahead, because horror has been doing pretty well, even though it's going to be February, or it is February when this airs, that we have horror still coming out, and you got an action comedy versus a horror comedy. It's going to be interesting to see which ones people flock to most.
For sure. Definitely looking forward to checking both of those out. But that's going to do it for this week's episode. Once again, we can't thank you enough for your continued support of the show. Coming up next week, we are going to be reviewing the film Love Hurts, as well as your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man episodes 3 through 5 dropping on Disney+. Until then, I'm Josh, he's Brad, and we'll see you next week.